We've got a phenomenal show lined up for you guys today. I am welcoming Mr. David Race of the Monstrosity podcast, he's joining me, and we're going to dive into all the weirdness that we can handle. So I hope you guys are ready, because we're going in. Hey everybody, and welcome to the Paranormal Portal Podcast. I'm your host, Brent Thomas. Thank you all for joining us, and special thank you goes out to all of you who continue to support the podcast and continue to spread the word. Always remember, if any of you out there have experiences of your own that you'd like to share, feel free to email me at paranormalportalradio@gmail.com. Again, paranormalportalradio@gmail.com, and you too could be a guest on the show. Hey David, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on today.
How you doing? I get a kick out of it. I do a good amount of podcasts as a guest, and you guys always have these cool studio backgrounds and things. I like the little Paranormal Portal blinking.
Sure.
I don't know if it's a neon light or something. You get the on air thing, which is great, and the time tunnel thing going on behind you. Dark room. All of the shows I do have these cool world you hang out in. I always look like I'm sitting in an art museum. There's fine paintings from the 1700s.
Whoa, that's amazing though.
I don't know who designed my concept.
Well, the only reason I have a set like this, just as a side note, is because I do live YouTube shows as well on Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday nights. So, I just figured it gives people something to look at other than me. For 2 hours.
You look like you're hanging out in the world's coolest basement.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But, let's talk about your journey, because, it's kind of my can opener. But I love to hear how people got to doing what they're doing. And so would you mind kind of giving us the rundown of what brought you to doing the Monstrosity podcast?
Well, I mean, so many people my age, I think, talk about that when they were kids, they were big fans of Leonard Nimoy in Search of, the TV show, which I was. Yeah. I was a huge fan of the show and terrified by it. I was scared of it, but loved it. And one of the things people don't talk about when they talk about that show is, obviously the topics are a little creepy and scary, sure, especially to a kid. But the thing that made that show special, it was a stylistic thing. They did it scary. They did it intensively. The background music, just the weird synth chords playing underneath his narration were awesome. When they tried to redo that show a few years ago on History Channel or something with the guy from, who played Spock in like the Star Trek movies recently.
Zachary Quinto.
When they tried to redo it with him, I remember thinking when I saw the announcement, I hope they understand what was good about that show. Like, I hope they go right back to the well and capture that, the background music, that mood. I hope they know that's what was special about it. Mm-hmm. And I watched the show with great high hopes that they would, because they went with the same name and same production element in their mind. They even went to the current Spock. Yeah. And they didn't know. They did not understand what was good about the original show and didn't capture it.
Right.
And that annoyed me. But as a kid, I loved that show. And then later on that was on in syndication, like in the 80s. So I was still watching into my teens and things, my teens, I'm watching 10-year-old investigations of Bigfoot. Like, there's much newer Bigfoot info by now. And I'm still watching the 10-year-old investigation because it's a rerun. And so that was my first interest in the topics, I would say. But then the jumping off point that leads to these podcasts of mine, first comedians talking about Bigfoot and now Monstrosity podcast. The jumping off points, I would say, are in, the mid 2000s. I start watching Monster Quest a lot. That becomes like my my new In Search Of. That show interests me, and I find it compelling. And then somewhere around that time, while I'm starting to watch that a lot and be really interested in the topics again, I have my own experience. In 2007, fall of 2007, and it's funny that this experience is going to involve Genesis, the rock band, because on my podcast, I have a running inside joke with my audience that I always work Genesis, the rock band, in some way or another into every conversation, even if I crowbar them in a way that makes no sense whatsoever.
Okay. Because
I'm the world's biggest Genesis fan since childhood. So I just ramrod them in. And if I realize 3/4 of the way through an episode that like I got through the celebrity interview portion of my show and didn't get the Genesis thing in there where maybe it was more natural to bring it up to the lead singer of a different rock band, to bring up a rock band, it might have been, natural. If I realize somewhere in my show that I haven't gotten to it yet, and now I'm talking to a UFO, guest, a UFO abductee, and I'm in the last 15 minutes of my show and I haven't gotten a Genesis question, I'll ramrod a Genesis question into the UFO abductee. It just becomes a train wreck. But that said, Genesis is involved in my Bigfoot incident. In 2007, fall 2007, my wife and I flew to the East Coast to see Genesis on what I thought would be their last tour that they were going to do. And we saw them at Madison Square Garden, saw a giant stadium in New Jersey. And then at the end of, because that's where I'm from, that area. And then at the end of that, a couple of days, we decided we would go upstate New York to my father's vacation house and join him and my stepmother there, just for a couple of days while we're on the East Coast, see the fall leaves, that kind of stuff. And, you don't see that in California. There's no fall. Sure. We don't have seasons here.
Right.
We sort of do now. We have like a rainy season. Oh, and then and then it's like 8 months of sunshine and 4 months of rain. Those are our seasons.
Okay.
But there's one more season. There's fire season. We have fire season also. Yeah. Anyway, so the trip upstate was to this house my father owned, which was on a 55-acre property. No neighbors nearby. It's 55 acres, and it was at the top of the plateau of a mountain. So to get to the house, you had to pull up on this nondescript, corner in this very rural area, and manually unlock the chain locked gate. Get out of the car and open it and stake them in the ground, and then drive your car up the cobble private road of the house, through the woods to the top of the plateau on the mountain, which was, a couple thousand feet up or 1,500 feet up or something. And that's where the house was built. The house was a very heavy, sturdy log cabin. I don't mean like something you could shake. I mean, Oregon log cabin, for like 3 or 4 bedrooms with a basement and beautifully furnished. And, but deep in the woods with the nearest neighbor, if you were standing on the porch of that house looking out, the nearest neighbor might be a mile away, on some other farm kind of property.
Sure.
And it's just, it's about 4 hours north of Manhattan. And please excuse the landscaper that has decided to suddenly show up outside. I hear them. Do you hear that?
Yeah.
I hear a leaf blower outside. So sure. That always, every podcast you do, the guy has to show up, all week. It's quiet as you can hear a pin drop in here until I have to talk to you.
Absolutely.
Any minute now, the Amazon deliveries will start. So my dog will go crazy. We'll get it all. Anyway, so the property is way up on this mountain, and about 10 o'clock, we were there like 2 nights, I think. About 10 o'clock on the first night, my wife is standing on the balcony looking through the telescope my father had, where you could see the crystal clear night and the stars and things, and the kind of thing she'd be interested in doing. And I'm just kind of in the living room seeing her through the glass out there doing that. And she's not like me. She's not really into these topics, and she's not easily spooked.
Okay.
But I keep seeing her kind of looking and then stopping, like something startled her, and looking around left, right, like feeling weird, then going back to it, that sort of thing. And then at some point she comes in and says to me, "Weird out here. I feel like I'm being watched."
Oh.
And she doesn't know Bigfoot stuff.
Okay.
This is somebody at that time. I don't even necessarily know that means something, but she's, I'm just telling you, like, I was naive to that probably at that time, but now I can tell you, we both would know that might mean something. And then she said, like, a rabbit ran by at one point, it seemed spooked and ran by from the woods, like running towards her and past her. And she just, keeps interrupting herself because she's feeling like she's hearing leaves creaking and something watching. It was weird. So she's spooked enough that she comes in after a little while, like 10, 15 minutes. She doesn't like it anymore out there.
Right. And
we don't think anything more of it after that. We go to bed. Later that night, I'm talking the dead middle of the night, 3:00 in the morning. My father and my stepmother are asleep on the other side of the house. Their bedroom would face their bedroom would face the side my wife was looking at the stars from, and the guest room was on this side, which is buttressing. All of it buttresses the woods, but I would say the guest room side is closest to the tree line.
Okay.
The tree line from the bedroom window in the guest room is probably 25 feet away.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And we're dead asleep on that side of the house when in the middle of the night, something walks up to the wall of that house and goes boom, boom, boom.
Oof.
I mean, I'm talking about like hits that would have knocked a normal house down. I mean, it was, if it was like, the normal neighborhood house you'd see anywhere in suburban, areas, the house would have giant holes in it. It would, like a freight train was hitting it, but with deliberate 3, pounds,
Yep.
We jumped up from our sleep, it startled us awake, we jumped up and looked at each other and went, what the hell? And then here's the weirdest part. Now, for years, I've never been able to explain this because it's not our normal behavior. It's not yours, not mine, not ours. Neither one of us looked at each other and said, what was that? And jumped up the 2 feet that it would have been for me to go to the Venetian blinds and just
peek,
go like this. Okay. Neither one of us did that. Instead, we just went, what was that?
Yeah.
And went
really?
Heads right back, like just like passed out unconscious asleep. Now, for years, I've wondered about this until I recently mentioned this to a particular Bigfoot guy. I don't remember which guy. Who was the first one ever to say this to me. He goes, Bigfoots use infrasound and they can control your actions. And he goes, I think it put you back down.
Wow. Because
you were only a foot away. Like really, I was like a lean for the tissue box distance away from just opening the blinds. I could have just like leaned out of the bed and, just
right.
And we would have been face to face.
Oof. That's freaky.
And instead of doing, if that happened in Los Angeles tonight, we both would have ran to the window. What burglars out there? Normal things would have happened.
Right.
But instead, both of us just went, what the heck? like puppets on a string and the strings were cut.
Right. Yeah. Having a banging just like that is like an adrenalized state. And it's not the kind of state that you would just normally like, well, back to sleep, That's crazy.
It wasn't even as deliberate as well. Back to sleep. It was boom.
Really? Wow.
Like something like a wizard stood there with his wand and went out. Yeah. Like in a Harry Potter movie or something.
Yeah.
We were out, and we went out, lights out, like not like light sleep, not like tossing and turning, worrying about it. We went under like an anesthesiologist was involved. Okay. Wow. And then when we woke up the next day, we talked about it. We were aware of it and talked about it, but we didn't toss and turn. We just went under in an instant. Okay.
Yeah.
So after that, I mentioned it to my father, I think that morning, and he's an ex-cop. And I said, do you ever see anything weird up here? Did you hear anything last night? No, I didn't hear anything last night. You ever see anything weird? I don't know. No. He doesn't believe in that sort of stuff and he has like a cop's kind of like,
sure,
cadence about it, and then, he said, it was probably a deer or something. And I go, if it was a deer that ran up and smashed into the wall 3 times, he'd be laying there right now, 4 legs up, unconscious, And like it doesn't make any sense what he's saying,
Right.
And then, after that, I go back into my real life and I'm watching Monster Quest again. And somewhere in there, like I guess I've become aware enough and it occurs to me to call the BFRO, the Bigfoot Field Research Organization, report this as an incident.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what really is going to happen from that, but I just felt like it's like a search for answers. Part of it is to report it.
Mm-hmm.
So I reported it, and next thing I know, one of their investigators calls me from that region, and he wants to talk about it. And we talked for like an hour, and then after that interesting hour, he had a lot of interesting questions. He calls me again like the next day. He has like another hour of questions. Like it was like really interesting. Like these guys are like really like detectives of Bigfoot,
Mm-hmm.
And one of his questions the second day was, let me ask you something. He goes, was the window open? The window near your bed, near the headboard, was it open? I said it was open like an inch, because it had a screen that was letting the cool air come in. It's the woods at night.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, okay, was your wife menstruating?
Oh, sure.
And I went, I don't remember. And then I said, but every woman on earth, for some bizarre reason, keeps an unbelievably accurate lifetime calendar of these events.
Yeah.
So all I have to do is ask her about this thing a couple of years ago, and she'll be able to tell me the answer to that question. So I went and asked her and called him back, and she was.
Oh.
And he said to me, I think you had a male Bigfoot at your window.
Oof.
And then he explained to me and reminded me, cause I had seen an episode about this, a Monster Quest, and I didn't immediately make the connection, but I think he reminded me that the location where my Bigfoot incident was is about 20 minutes away from Whitehall, New York, a famous Bigfoot location full of Bigfoot incidents in the same county on the same mountain line.
Oh,
so I was only about 20 minutes away from the Whitehall Bigfoot incidents, not even making that immediate connection at the time. So it is a Bigfoot area. Then when I went back to my father and asked him again at some point subsequently, are you sure you never see anything up there? All of a sudden in this, throwaway, like kind of cop way, he's like, I don't know. I mean, a couple of times there was a dead deer on a road. It's like his back leg's broken. I thought it was strange, but I figured it was a lion or something. I'm like, a lion in upstate New York, And then he goes, yeah, then we used to put our dog out in the dog run sometimes and go out for the day. And the dog hated being in that dog run. The dog would be terrified in the corner and wouldn't want us to ever leave her in that dog run ever. Wow. Like she wasn't like that anywhere else but up there.
Yeah. Wow.
It's like he's inadvertently giving me new Bigfoot information.
Yeah.
But that's my sort of incident. I've talked about this incident on my show and with Matt Moneymaker on my show. I've talked about it, and I've talked about it with Matt off the air. And Matt has, as the owner and head of the BFRO, has gone back into their deep files and looked up my original investigation notes. He's went back and talked to their investigator about his conversations with me. Mm-hmm. And Matt considers it a valid, I think he calls it a Class B sighting, which is like where I didn't see it eye to eye, but he has no other explanation for it.
Was there marks on the outside of the house where this banging happened, or any?
The area is grass. It's grass right up to the house.
Right, but how about on the house?
Nothing to step in. No, that house was like a bird. I mean, okay. I'm talking about logs like.
Oh, sure. Okay. Wow. That's intense.
Yeah, and the height that the banging would have been, based on where the bedroom was and where that window was and where it sounded like the banging was coming from, it was something that was reaching up 10, 11 feet banging.
Jeez. It's so incredible to think that it was so close and was probably watching her, when she was outside and was just hanging around. I don't know what that is, but it's really an intimidating thought,
Listen. If we hadn't been infrasounded back to sleep, okay, and I had actually leaned over and opened the blinds, I would have been face to face with this thing. Okay, I would still be unconscious in that room right now. There are not enough smelling salts to have gotten me awake again after that.
Yeah, I think it's hard to understand what it would be like to just come face to face with something that is so big and so powerful and, so capable of just pounding a person into pudding and to be just, encountering that in real life. I can't imagine the shock, the paradigm shift and all that, but even just having that event happen, I think is incredibly powerful and incredibly frightening as well.
Yeah, very much. And, I thank God that the infrasound part of it happened, because it sort of reminds me of, I was once in a really, really bad car accident as a passenger. And the kind where I was in the hospital for a few weeks. And it's a similar thing in terms of the brain doesn't let you remember the details of that kind of thing. Like that accident, I remember like when the cops came to me in my hospital bed and asked me questions about things, trying to piece together the accident. I remember they said to me, what do you remember? And I was like, I don't remember anything, and they're like, what's the last thing you remember? I said, I remember getting in the car. I remember we had to go onto Ventura Boulevard to make coming out of the ramp onto Ventura Boulevard, and we were going to make a left. And I said, so I knew that she was setting up to make a left turn. And then they go, do you remember what hit you? And I said, no. And then I sort of stopped for a second, like cause I had a flash in my mind, like just like a flash. And I stopped for a second. And I said, I don't know why, but I just want to say white SUV, but I don't even know why. I don't even know why I'm saying that. The cops just kind of nodded, scratched their chin like that meant nothing to them, really. Kind of wrote, like, the way cops act, they just kind of went,
sure,
wrote like something down on a piece of paper, like, this man's a nut job, and walked out of the room.
Sure. Okay.
Fast forward to like 6 months later, when I somehow got my hands on the complete accident report and like really read the details of everything that happened that night, it was a white SUV that hit us.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's insane.
I had no real conscious memory of it.
Right.
The brain will protect you from the worst things. It doesn't want you to remember and see those things. And in this case, the Bigfoot himself seems to have put us down.
Right. It is interesting though, because I've heard suggestions and I can't cite any kind of medical papers or whatever, but that we are actually taking in tons of information all the time, but our conscious mind whittles it down. So that must be some really profound protective mechanism that when you're in a traumatic experience, it just really locks it down.
Yeah. It has to do with the traumatic stuff. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. And you hear this all the time, I think. I think a ton of people who are in like really bad accidents would tell a story sort of like I just did.
Just boom. Yeah. And life changed.
That they don't remember the details like that.
Well, I'm glad you made it through it. Jeez, that's incredible.
Yeah. And people who are crime victims, people who are in like a really bad crime.
Yeah.
They got stabbed. Will probably not remember.
Yeah.
The stabs, so your perception is like, oh my God, you got stabbed a dozen times on the street corner. Like that must have hurt like hell, or whatever normal sort of thing you might say. And like their reaction might be like, I don't remember it. Like the last thing I remember is walking up to the ATM and clicking in. I need $60 and like, having it spit 60 out. And then like I turned around.
Yeah.
And that's like that. That literally might be their whole story. That's the last thing I remember. Now the details of that crime might be they were then stabbed 12 times, beaten with a rock, left there unconscious, bludgeoned and stabbed. And they don't have any memory of any of that. Right. The brain makes sure of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got to be a real protective mechanism. But so you had this incredible experience, and you have had more experiences than that, right?
I had one UFO incident more recent than that one. That the Bigfoot thing was 2007. The UFO thing was, I don't have a fix on the year. I'm just going to take an educated guess. Sure. Late teens, 18, 17, 20, so somewhere between say 2017 and 2019, somewhere in that range is probably about when this was. I was, driving to a meeting, like a Hollywood kind of meeting, a show busy thing, in LA. And I always, when I tell this story, I always like to let the person at home play along like it's a game show.
Sure.
So open up your Google Maps right now. You could street view this with me, and then you can actually watch this through my eyes. I couldn't have done that for the Bigfoot story for you, but I can do that for the listener right now for this one. So I'll give you a second, open your Google Maps, get the street view, and get yourself to Victory Boulevard in Los Angeles at the corner of Sepulveda Boulevard. Victory and Sepulveda in Los Angeles. This is in the San Fernando Valley. And
How do you spell Sepulveda?
Sepulveda is S-E-P-U-L-V-E-D-A. Sepulveda. Yeah. S-E-P-U-L-V-E-D-A. Okay. Victory and Sepulveda.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So I'm on Victory Boulevard, facing due east at the corner of Sepulveda, looking towards Burbank, facing due east in my car. And my intention is to drive right through that intersection, continuing on Victory, right? My plan is to continue on Victory through Sepulveda, keep going east. While I'm waiting at that traffic light, in broad daylight on a sunny weekday afternoon, it's a long light, I start noticing in the distance, like in the sky, what to my eye looks like it would be about above Burbank, due east of me, straight ahead of me, but very high up. Just little silver glinting lights moving around and past each other, like a half dozen of them, kind of changing positions from one another. You know, one's over here, two over there, two more over here, and then like the couple swap, and this one moves here, and that one moves over there, this one goes to it, and that one goes. They're deliberately changing directions and moving around each other, dancing around each other.
Okay.
Not in any way a balloon would act.
Mm-hmm.
Changing direction, moving around. And depending on the size of them, there's no way to know this, but just assuming that these things were of significant size, then whatever I'm looking at is very, very high up in the sky. Very high up. Okay. If it was a smaller object, then it could have been much lower than I think. But my perception was I'm looking at something relatively large and very, very high up. That was what I would say is how it was. My mind was conceiving what I'm seeing.
Sure.
And the sun is glinting off these silver objects as they move around and dance around each other and change positions. And I'm just kind of watching during this long traffic light. What the heck is that? So I start realizing this may be a UFO sighting. So I know that I have time. I'm pretty early from my meeting or whatever. So I decide to make a right turn on Sepulveda, back to the playing along with the ride here. I'm sitting in that corner. Instead of going straight through, I decide to make a right turn onto Sepulveda.
Okay.
And find a place to park where I can actually keep watching. So I make a right turn. I go about a block, and there's a house paint retailer right there on the right side.
Okay.
I don't know if Benjamin Moore paints or Dunn paints or whatever. I forget what the paints are called, but somebody's paints is right there. And I park the car in front of the paint place in a parking spot that enables me to just sit looking in that same direction.
Okay.
Where I could just sit and stare right in that, keep that same eye position I had from the corner.
Right.
And I'm still watching this go on. I call my wife. I tell her what I'm watching, that I think I'm watching a UFO incident right now. And she's asking me about it. And I realize after a few minutes of and talking to her that now I got to get going. Like I can't afford to be late to this meeting. So I think, well, I'm going to be heading east anyway. I'll still be able to watch this. Just continue east, and I'm just going to keep my eyes on it. But when I continued east, I can't remember what street is right there that I probably jumped on, whatever next main street is that goes that way.
Okay.
As soon as I continued eastbound, between the palm trees in my way and the regular trees and the houses and like the angle changing, I don't know if the glinting objects were no longer there, or I just no longer could keep eyes on them. Or also, as a driver, your perception is you're still going east. You think you perceive yourself as being on a straight road going east. But the truth is, if you're looking at a map of what you're on, you might be going like southeast. You might be going northeast. You may not be going due east. The road might be doing this. You know what I mean? Your perception is I'm still on an eastbound road. Like right. I am generally on an eastbound road, but I might be on a southeastbound road right now.
Okay.
Not really a straight east, So if the thing is really straight east to me, or it's a little bit northeast to me, which I think it would seem a little northeast to me, and maybe the road is, unbeknownst to me, the angle, the straight line I'm driving is a little bit southeast. If I'm still looking straight ahead of me and thinking there, it should be there, but I'm really going southeast now. Like it's actually over here. You know what I mean? Like I've lost it.
Yeah.
So within a few blocks, I just remember being like, damn it, I don't see it anymore.
Right.
And I never picked it up again the rest of the ride. Now, when I got home, I did go on YouTube and I typed in a lot of descriptives of what I felt I saw, like multiple silver objects very high in the sky, moving around past each other. I typed in different phrases and keywords and things that were descriptive of what I saw to see what sort of things come up in YouTube videos that maybe look like what I saw.
Right.
To me, the gold mine would have been if I came up with like Johnny Johnson in Sherman Oaks today filmed the same thing I saw.
Oh yeah.
And I'd be like, hey, that's a film of what I was watching. That's what I was really, really hoping for. But what I ended up getting was not that someone filmed what I saw today. What I did get was people all over the world had UFO sightings that were exactly what I saw, just on different days, different years, different times.
Right.
So I was looking at like a YouTube video from Spain from 3 years earlier. That was like the same exact thing I saw today. Wow. That was classified as a UFO video. Then I saw like a UFO video from England from 6 years earlier. That was exactly the same thing I saw today.
That's intense. Now, let me ask you, as somebody that deals with the paranormal, has experienced it in terms of the Bigfoot and the UFO incident, do you think that, as far as the UFOs, do you think that this is something that is being, and I don't mean to put you in a weird spot, I'm just always curious where people stand with this. Do you think, first of all, that it's pretty well understood within our government and such, and do you think that there's an active effort to, quash this stuff? Do you have an opinion on that?
By active effort by the government to quash it?
Yeah.
It certainly seems like that over the last 70 years.
Yeah.
There's been more government acknowledgement recently.
Yes.
In the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
But even the acknowledgement they're doing now, they do it with with some veils in it. Like, for a good example is that they formally now refer to these incidents as UAP incidents.
Right. Okay.
So that they can duck the alien thing a little more. They can act a little more like, well, we're not saying it's alien. We're saying there's just something up there. We don't know what it is. It could be a Chinese weapon. Like they're wanting to not quite say to the general public, there's something up there and it's alien.
Yeah.
So they're altering the name a little of what they're calling it.
Very true.
And the news media still handles it with a smirk. It's not something the media takes seriously yet, in my opinion, the regular, news media. Sure. I was shocked actually a week or two ago, really shocked to see John Oliver do a pretty heavy deep dive into this whole UFO thing, and taking the position that there's something going on that they're not telling. What the hell is this?
Wow.
I was of all shows.
Yeah.
He's very comedic and cynical and very sarcastic. And he's just not the guy I'd expect to do a half-hour deep dive on Bigfoot.
Yeah.
And he his show is full of a long form kind of expose of something. Mm-hmm. How these ingredients in cereals are killing you or whatever, Yep. And there he was with a half hour going, listen, there's something to this UFO thing. And your government's not telling you everything. John Oliver did this a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. I wouldn't have expected that either. I will say that one thing that I found absolutely peculiar or maybe very telling, I'm not sure what to make of it, but there seems to be two very distinct schools of thought. And from the Pentagon, it's nothing to see here, move along. We have no credible evidence, but from branches of our armed services, like the Navy, they're like, we don't know what these things are, but they're well beyond our capabilities and they're not ours. And so they seem to be, and other military figures have spoken to the probability that these things are not, human constructed, that there's something else, whether, whatever that means. At least they seem to be acknowledging the challenge of what this is a lot more honestly than the Pentagon itself, which is, you would think there would be this unified messaging across, but there really isn't. Have you noticed that?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of, card tricks going on with the UFO disclosure. They've always been afraid to completely acknowledge it. Certain other countries, there's other countries that are more open with it. England and Russia come to mind. That they've seemed to be slightly more open books on the subject.
Sure.
I think Belgium.
Yeah.
But none of them, not England, Belgium either, are like really, really, really open books.
Right.
Like the British Prime Minister isn't on TV tonight going, listen, I am here to announce that I am contradicting the White House. There are goddamn aliens. It's absolutely true. We have 10 of them right now locked up at this base. And, tomorrow night I'm going to go on live TV and show them to you. They're not doing that either. Like,
sure.
No one's really, really coming out there with it.
Right. Good point. Yeah. But it is interesting that there, even as you suggest, on the world stage, there's different messaging as well. So there seems to be at least different interest groups that are trying to be, disseminate and be the spokesperson for the official opinion, but it's not the same message. So it's like, something's here. There's something to see here.
If I had to pick what seems to be the approach, I think it's that the government knows it's real.
Yeah.
All these governments know it's real. And I think their hope is that they can keep a lid on it maybe forever, but they know that there's a strong possibility they can't. So they need to keep the general public at some degree of acceptance and preparation for the probable inevitable.
That's a good point.
That it's not just an absolute, utter, out of nowhere shock. Yeah. It's we already had the public kind of half stepped into it.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I think you're right, because once the lid blows its own, whatever the metaphor I'm trying to say, whenever it exposes itself, yeah, it would really shoot all of their credibility to say, hey, you guys knew about this and didn't let us know. But yeah, I think that's a great take.
They want everyone in a state of sort of halfway there.
Yeah.
So the anarchy that follows the potential inevitable, like, the UFO landing on the White House lawn kind of scenario, isn't as dramatic as it would be if they took everyone from 0 to 100.
Yeah.
Today at 1:00.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. But I think some of the old excuses, like, well, they can't tell people because there'd be pandemonium and religion would erupt and, people wouldn't know what to believe. But I don't think that that's true, because when the Tic Tacs videos were first released and they were like, yeah, these are Navy videos and that's showing something we don't understand, it really wasn't as huge of a blurb in our information ecosystem than, there's a new flu virus. I mean, it was literally just kind of a hiccup in it. And I think people are kind of there anyway, don't you?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, polls show that some very significant percentage of the American public is down with this topic. I think it might even be a majority. I don't know, but I know it's not nobody.
Right.
It's not a minor sliver of.
Right. Yeah.
And that lines up with what I said a minute ago. That's probably right about where the federal government needs us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's a brilliant observation, though. I think you're absolutely right that they're at least chumming the water a little bit, but they're not throwing in the actual fish.
Right, because they're hoping to never have to actually confront the UFO on the White House lawn.
Yep.
Break into live news. They're hoping that one doesn't happen, but they also don't want the absolute chaos that would come from it if it did.
Yeah. Wasn't that a famous UFO picture of like these saucers over the White House? Wasn't that, or am I?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah, there's loads, yes.
From the 50s.
There's been UFO incidents in DC over the years that have produced many famous photos.
Yeah, exactly. So I got to ask you now, you've certainly had your experiences. You're obviously interested in the topic. So at what point did that translate to, I know you've got a really robust broadcasting career. through many different facets of it, from Howard Stern to being a disc jockey yourself to being a part of television shows and so much more. But when did it become your scope to go, I want to do a show that at least addresses this?
That marries it up with this stuff. Yeah. That's a simple one. I mean, it's a great simple one, meaning like easy question for you to answer, because I know exactly what the answer is. It's not abstract in my mind. I remember what happened and how it happened. And basically it's this. Yes, I previously had a radio career. Mm-hmm. And then in, around 2000, somewhere around year 2000, I turned into a stand-up comedian. I adjust from being a radio broadcaster for many years towards stand-up comedy, which was always sort of like at my core who I was, mm-hmm. Back in school and things like that. I always, don't get me wrong, I always wanted to be a disc jockey as a childhood, fantasy of mine. Like other kids were out wanting to be firemen and astronauts. I wanted to be a disc jockey. I was a weird kid.
Sure.
And I did that plenty, mm-hmm. did 10 years of that. But comedian was deep ingrained in me. I was the kid always getting suspended from school for too many jokes in class. I won class clown of the year in the yearbook, like that stupid stuff was my world.
Sure.
So later on, after I've been a disc jockey for a while, and as a disc jockey, you do a lot of public appearances. You do a lot of nightclub appearances, a lot of bringing rock bands on stage. Mm. I started getting more comfortable in front of a mic, in front of a live audience, in front of even if it was to come on stage and bring on stage a rock band, a concert, that was practice for I've got a live mic and those are people, and ladies and gentlemen, sure. It was different than being at a radio studio doing my radio show to an empty room and a wall.
Sure.
I started getting comfortable with this is what it feels like to be on stage with live humans looking at you and reacting in real time. And I started getting myself in trouble actually during those years because I'm supposed to just bring the band on. Have you ever listened to an old classic rock live album?
Sure.
Yeah. Peter Frampton. Yeah. Peter Frampton Comes Alive, famous album. You'll hear like a disc jockey come on and he'll be like, he's an honorary member of San Francisco Society, Mr. Peter Frampton. You're not supposed to say much. It's called the true bring on. You're supposed to just come on and go, I'm David Race from WW blah, 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 blah. Hey, you guys have a good time tonight. All the way from Chicago. Here's Cheap Trick. Sure. That's all you're supposed to do. Get out of the way. Cheap right. Trick is who they're here to see. Right. And I was coming on and doing jokes. I was coming on with bands, rock band, major rock bands, standing there side stage looking at me what the hell's with this guy? I'm up there doing 3 minutes of material, with the band, and I know as a live performer later on after I was a disc jockey, I'm a stand-up comedian. So I know what it is to be a live performer waiting in the wings about to go on.
Yeah.
You're very you're shaking your leg. You're ready to go now. It's like a horse out of the starting gate is the feeling,
Sure.
So if you're, Aerosmith and you're standing side stage and the guy comes on and all he's supposed to do is go, probably the greatest rock band ever from Boston. Ladies and gentlemen, here they are, Aerosmith. If that's all you're supposed to do and get out of the way. Steven Tyler wants to rush onto that stage right now. He's ready to take that mic and sing, and when he sees you standing there going, but first, a few things. He kind of you see him kind of looking at his manager, what's with this guy? I mean, different bands had different reactions to me. I remember the band, as in the band,
mm-hmm.
They were still touring, even though Robbie Robertson wasn't in the band anymore, but the rest of the guys were. So Levon Helm and Rick Danko and those guys were on tour. And I brought them on stage once to 10,000 people. And I remember that was one of the nights I really went off with a lot of material. and I just remember them smirking and looking at each other what's wrong with this guy? And then, and then as I passed them, as they're coming on stage and I'm passing them because I now have brought them on, I remember Rick Danko kind of just looking at me and kind of going and I remember Levon Helm holding his drumsticks, walking to his drum set, just glaring at me, just staring at me like he wants to kill me. Like just holding his drumsticks, walking by like,
oh no.
Okay. And then when I got off the stage, their manager was this big burly mountain man. And I just like squeaked around him and ran through the Coliseum building. It's an oval building. I ran through the hallways, ran for my life, knowing this guy's going to try to kill me. And I ran for my life until I got to like a door that said exit and pushed it and just spit myself out into a parking lot, nowhere near my car. I just ran to my car and sped away from the arena. Because it was dangerous. Like the band manager was going to kill me. So these things were going on at the end of my disc jockeying years, turning me into a stand-up comedian full time. Mm-hmm. And then eventually, this leads to your answer. Eventually, I moved to LA. When I was doing stand-up on the East Coast, I was starting to make a lot of inroads. I was in the newspapers all the time, and during that time, when I was really starting to consider moving to LA, and I met Jay Leno by coincidence during that time. Oh. I knew I was going to meet him that afternoon. Like I knew I'm going to meet him that night. And I had this idea that what if I write him some jokes from today's news? Just see what he thinks of them, since I know I'm thinking about moving to LA anyway. And so I just went online. This is like early days of internet probably. I went online and I just looked at today's headlines, and I wrote like a half dozen monologue jokes that I felt would fit the Tonight Show monologue tonight. If someone told me write for Tonight Show, like these are jokes I would have written for today. Sure. And I typed them all up on a piece of paper, printed them out, and folded them in my pocket. And like Rupert Pupkin, in whatever that movie's called. The hell's that movie? Robert De Niro, Rupert Pupkin. Anyway, I forget what it's called. But like him, when I met Jay that night, I said, by the way, I'm thinking about moving to LA, and I just thought, like, I knew I was going to meet you tonight. That I'd give you just some sample jokes that I think would have worked tonight in tonight's monologue if you're doing the show tonight. Mm-hmm. And I gave them to him, and I remember thinking, like, those are going right in the garbage. Like, he kind of took the piece of paper and he went like, all right, okay, thanks. He kind of stuffed in his inside breast pocket, and I was like, those are never seen the light of day. Sure. The next day, my phone rings. The voicemail on it is, "Hey, how you doing? Jay Leno. I read these jokes here. These are good jokes. You're a very good writer." And he said, "Give me a call back, and I'll tell him I want to talk to you." Oh, nice. Wow. And I called the hotel, and I'm probably the 100th person to call that day because his name's on the marquee outside the hotel. And I call the hotel, and I go, "I know you guys must be getting calls like this all day, but I'm returning Jay Leno's call." Mm-hmm. and the operator's like, "Yeah, okay." I'm like, "No, he really just called me." Yeah. I go, "But I know you're not going to believe me. So just put me on his room voicemail and let him handle it." To my amazement, she did that. Oh, nice. Okay. So I get on his voicemail. I said, "Is David Ray's calling you back? I got your voicemail. Sure, give me a call back. I'm around now." 10 minutes later, phone rings again. It's Jay Leno again. Oh, nice. Okay. And he's like, "Yeah, these are really good jokes. You got quite an ear. I think this one's really strong, and this one I would have used actually." And he goes, "Do me a favor." He goes, "You think I'm moving to LA?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "All right, call my assistant. Her name is blah, blah, blah. Here's her number direct." He goes, "Tell her I said to call, and have her sign you a release, and just write me jokes every day. Just send me jokes. I'm going to use some of your stuff." Neat. Wow. And that was one of the weirdest calls I ever made. Like that was like a Friday. Like on Monday morning, I had to call LA from New Jersey and like, "Hi, my name's David Ray." Said, "Jay said to call." This is like the height of the Tonight Show, Sure. I got her on the phone. I signed their paperwork and I started submitting jokes. He did a few on the show. I wrote probably over the next year, almost every day. I wrote like 4 or 5. He did a couple, but that was leading into my move to LA. This is a very long answer I could have answered this question short. I realized you asked me one question. I've turned it into a lot of time, Kelly. You okay with that? Because I've definitely given you the longest form answer. This was not the Cliff Notes answer. No worries. All right. And when you hear ultimately how I can devolve this down to such a short answer, you're going to be amazed that I gave you this version. So eventually I'm in LA doing stand up. Now, here's where the answer to your real question starts to take shape. By this point in time, I'm starting to be a Monster Quest viewer. I'm starting to be very interested in these topics again.
Sure.
And then comes my Bigfoot incident in 2007, deepening my interest. I do the report to the BFRO, and by now I'm starting to be like an avid reader of every Bigfoot book you can take out of the LA library. Like any book in the LA library about a Bigfoot incident, I had taken out at this point, like in 2007, 8, 9.
Mm-hmm.
Around this same time, almost all the comedians are starting to do podcasts. They're all talking backstage about their podcasts.
Oh.
And I'm looking at that cockeyed because I'm thinking, podcast? Like, I was already a real disc jockey in New York and Philadelphia for years and years. Like, I'm not going to go do a radio show from my house. Like that doesn't, like, it seemed to me like a walk backwards. It didn't appeal to me, the idea of moving that. It seemed like, to me, that seemed like a reverse move in my plan in life. You know, like I did that already and I did it for real.
Right.
You know? So I couldn't get my head around the idea of even the thought of even doing something like that. But I kept hearing these discussions, and the common thing was that the podcast setup, the format of almost all of them was the Joe Johnson show, the Steve Stevens show, the Mike Michaels show. They were all comedians, you know, and those are fake names I made up, but I mean, you get the idea.
Right.
And the premise almost always was Mike and his friends around the kitchen table joking around, or Jim and just his one buddy talking about whatever.
Right.
Just kind of generally ranting with funny guys,
mm-hmm.
you know. And I just remember thinking, I'm going to do a podcast. I want to construct around it. Yeah. I don't want it to be just the David Ray show, David and whoever just sitting there talking.
Right.
I wanted something hung around it. And I'm in the shower one day where I do my best thinking. I have often said to people that if I could spend all day in the shower every day, I'd be running the world.
Nice.
I could run the world from the shower very effectively. Put a red phone in there and I'll have everything handled. So I'm in the shower and I'm standing there and it occurs to me, wait a minute. I'm really passionate about this Bigfoot stuff,
mm-hmm.
and I'm really knowledgeable about it now. Like I'm 4 million pages read into the topic at this point. Like I know everything upside down and sideways on it. I have my own incidents. I authentically feel it and believe it. What if I do a podcast that's got that construct on it? What if it's comedians talking about Bigfoot? You know,
mm-hmm.
me, a couple comedian friends of mine, and like we'll get people from, you know, TV shows, Bigfoot TV shows as the guests. And that's the triangle. Like it's like I'm at the point of it. I'm interested in it. I mean it. I'm serious about it, but I'm a comedian.
Sure. And
then my 2 comedian friends, whoever they are each episode, are probably skeptical. They're comedians. They're sarcastic. They're looking for ways to work their jokes in. That's always what comedians are going to do, you know?
Right.
And you know, they're like comedians. If you could physically represent what they are, they're guys who are like, I want the spotlight. I want the spotlight. I'm taking it back from you. I've got it. Give me the camera. Yeah. That's the mic. I have the mic. I have 2 mics. You know, that's, you know, comedians are attention hog guys. You know, I knew that's what they'll do with it, you know, mm-hmm. and then force me and them into a conversation with Clem, the guy who's got a bunch of Bigfoot things happening in Alabama. And the next week, you know, Gary, who saw something in Oregon last Tuesday, you know, and this will be an interesting train wreck combination of things, you know. By the 7th episode of that show, it had a TV deal.
Wow. Okay.
And I ended up going off and doing a TV deal with the guys from Monster Quest, of all places, the show I was already obsessively watching.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up going and doing a TV deal with them that was based on that podcast. And I was the executive producer and the host, and I cast two comedians that I knew as like my sidekicks in it.
Right.
And we went and shot a whole week pilot. We didn't shoot like a little demonstration thing. We shot for a week, in Minnesota. And, you know, it was pretty well done in a lot of ways, but there were things that went wrong.
Sure.
That aren't how I would have done it. And, you know, the end result through a combination of things, you know, certain things that went wrong in how we executed it, certain things that went wrong that were totally out of our control that had to do with, you know, just, other people involved and things going on in their lives.
Sure.
The combination of these things kept it from selling.
Oh.
And after about a year of involvement with that whole project, I was back in LA, kind of like, all right, now what? And I thought, I want to go back to the podcast thing, do that again. But let me not do comedians talking about Bigfoot. Let's not just bring that back like after a couple years layoff, like, and here's season 2. I probably could have done that, but at the time I didn't think of podcasts as stuff that like you could stop and start like that. So while the audience probably would have accepted it, I didn't, in my mind, they wouldn't have. So I thought, let me just do something similar, but not that. So I thought Monstrosity. I like the name.
Sure.
Got monster in it. Got monster in it, but the show is a monstrosity, but it's kind of a comedic word. It had a lot of things I liked in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I designed the logo for Monstrosity, which is, if you look at each letter, almost every letter is something weird. The S in Monstrosity is a Sasquatch. Or one of them's a Loch Ness Monster.
Monster,
yeah. There's different, there's a UFO in there, the letter O or something. I designed that on a napkin or something, like sitting at this desk on that right now. I remember just sketching that out, like on like a piece of paper or something. And, in my terrible handwriting, going, that looks kind of cool.
Yeah.
And I had a graphic designer make what I wrote.
Yeah.
And I thought the difference between Monstrosity and comedians talking about Bigfoot will be that it won't be married to comedians. It'll be comedians sometimes, but also it's just generic celebrities, actors, actresses, rock stars.
Right. Yeah.
And me and the paranormal person. It won't be, that's the main difference. It won't be automatically comedians. Comedians is not in the title. It won't be, It's always 2 comedians and me and a paranormal. Instead, it'll be a legit actor, a legit rock star and me and a paranormal person. And maybe a comedian also. It can vacillate. So, the first few episodes is a little more comedian-ish. Mm-hmm. At the time, it was just getting off the ground and it didn't have a reputation yet. So it wasn't as easy to get celebrities to come to the show yet in the first few episodes.
Right.
So the first few are comedians, like very formatted, like the old show.
Yeah.
And then, somewhere within the first 4 episodes or so, I think we get Peter Brady from the Brady Bunch.
Oh, neat. Okay.
And then, it kind of starts being a pattern at first, of a lot of like iconic stars from my childhood, like Daisy Duke from the Dukes of Hazzard. Lonnie Anderson is on early on in that period. And one of the other beautiful things about the show is that most of the guests come in live and do the show in person.
Oh, very cool.
I'm in LA, so I have that advantage geographically, for that. Yeah. And the show is really well produced and professional. And I'm an actual radio guy. So like they hear it, their managers hear it, their agents hear it, and they go, no, this doesn't sound like some homemade thing. They're not going to send you an actual celebrity to like, some guy's basement in Detroit, they're hearing the show. They go, whoa, this sounds professionally produced in a real studio. Like the guy sounds like an actual broadcaster. Okay. We can send Lonnie to that, so Lonnie Anderson comes walking in,
very cool.
And it went like that for a while. And then the guests started getting a little broader. If I had to pick a common theme to the guests, it's no longer just as always classic old time, people. A lot of them, the episodes are, but it's not always that. If I had to pick a common theme to the celebrity guests, it's that me, David, I have to have a vested interest in who this person is. Right. I don't like just like kind of faking my way through it. I don't want to talk to the lead of a particular movie that I don't care about at all. That I'm not even a fan of that. And that's like more difficult for me. But if I have someone there that again, I don't have to be their hugest super fan. It doesn't have to be a member of Genesis. I did get that done, by the way. I got a member of Genesis on it. So that was awesome.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be that, it can be, somebody that I'm more marginally a fan of, but I still have a point of view about them.
Right.
I can hook into what I really think about the project that they did, the thing they're famous for. And that's the common theme. So when I have a newer actress on, I had Tanya Raymond on from Amazon's Goliath, it was because I liked the show Goliath a lot. I watched every episode and I thought she was beautiful and I thought she was really good in her role on it. And So she's not iconically famous like the guy from the Brady Bunch.
Right.
But, she's a current celebrity, but she's on a thing I'm watching a lot that I have a strong point of view about. That's sort of almost always going to be the consistency.
Sure.
With that in mind, I can tell your audience right now, and this is the first reveal of this anywhere in the world, because I never reveal who's on the next episode of my show until they're out. But your audience is getting an advanced preview right now. The next episode of my show in studio with me is Nicole Eggert from Baywatch.
Oh, cool. Wow.
So that'll be the next one they hear. And the one that's out right now, the current episode is Jennifer Lee Cox, who did a brilliant Jan Brady in the Brady Bunch movie. Oh. And right before her, the episode before that was Kelly Hu from Scorpion King and X2 and Ash Bridges. Other recent episodes were Mickey Thomas, the lead singer of Starship.
Oh, okay.
Natasha Henstridge, the blonde from Species.
Oh, wow.
John Anderson, lead singer of Yes. Those are some of the recent episodes.
That's amazing. Now, let me ask you, because I'm kind of curious. I've not talked to pretty much anybody in Hollywood that I know of. But how are they in terms of interest in the paranormal? Do you find that these discussions are really interesting? The parts where they are part of the paranormal discussion as well.
Well, we don't put any rules on the guests having to have any interest in that or having to have any incidents or stories to tell about.
Sure.
It's made very clear to them when we're booking them, like, don't worry about that. We have that covered.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we'd never get a guest. Like if every guest had to feel like I've got a good enough story, they'll measure in their own minds, is my story really good enough? Or do I even have one? Like I don't want to ever limit the guest pool down like in any way artificially that I don't have to.
Sure.
But while we don't put any requirements on them, we also don't ask them in advance, do they or don't they? Mm-hmm. And often find ourselves surprised by the fact that they do.
Yeah.
Almost every time have an incident to tell me about.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the particular guests we have on the show agree to do the show. I think that they become interested in the show because they're like, oh my God, I could talk about my career and that UFO incident. Like that's not something I ever get to say on Jimmy Fallon,
Right.
Suddenly David Hasselhoff is dying to tell me about a ghost incident he had, like, which is not something he ever talks about, and I think that's what makes them maybe come in and do my thing.
Yeah.
So I'd say 8 out of 10 times they have an incident for me.
Sure.
They almost all of them are interested in the topic to some degree. If they're before COVID, every single episode required the guest to come in. So the celebrities were in studio with me. Every episode was a requirement of the show before COVID.
Sure.
When COVID hit, that changed the whole world and it changed everything. And it turned into a situation where, like, about half the episodes now, the guest is remote from wherever they are. And about half they come in. It's kind of, some episodes are in, some episodes they're not.
Sure.
On the episodes where the guest is not in studio, post-COVID, the ones on the certain episodes, where the guest is not in studio. For example, Jennifer Lee Cox, the Brady Bunch one I just did, she's not in studio with me.
Okay. She
sounds like she is because we have a really good, like, what's called ISDN connection where she sounds like she's right with me. We can get that sound, but she happened not to be. Okay. In a case like that, she's on the first half hour and then her segment ends. And then I go on to a deep discussion with the UFO person or whoever it is. Mm-hmm. In a case like Nicole Eggert, she's in studio. So she's on the whole hour.
Oh, nice.
And is participating in all things.
That's cool.
One of my favorite ones like that was we had, Erin Murphy on, who was Tabitha on Bewitched.
Oh, okay.
On the real Bewitched, not Tabitha the TV show in the 70s.
Right.
She was Tabitha the Kid with Elizabeth Montgomery on Bewitched. And she came in and did my show in studio. And it's the only time I've ever booked not a Bigfoot guest, not a UFO guest, not a ghost, hunter guest. Those are always sort of the types I go for. I thought this would be a funny twist. I booked her with an actual witch.
Okay.
You know, and I had her in a discussion with an actual witch. So that is
clever. Yeah. How'd it go, by the way? I haven't heard that one.
It was fun. It was a funny one. I mean, another common thing I do on my show is I play little game shows. I invent little game shows for people to play. Wheel of Monsters. You know, they spin a roulette wheel and like it lands on a monster and tell me everything you could tell me about that creature in the next 30 seconds. I'll see how right you are. You know, something, different various game shows.
Yeah.
I have like 10 of them. Did a Bigfoot do it is one of them. I tell you a story about a thing from a news article that a Bigfoot supposedly was seen doing. Did a Bigfoot do this or not? Did this actually happen? You know, and like the celebrity has to think it through. And, you have like Pamela Anderson sitting there going, I don't know, would a Bigfoot have done that? You know, thinking it through, like playing this game out with me.
That's cool. Very cool.
When we had Natasha Henstridge on, she's Canadian. She's the blonde species in the movie Species.
Right.
And we had her on. She was in studio, and the game I played with her, because she's Canadian, was, is it a hockey player or a paranormal creature? Okay. And I give her the names, and like, it was like, Oglethorpe, and she's like, Oglethorpe. I think that sounds like it's a creature. That's probably some kind of a creature. I'm like, nope, that was the fighter in Slapshot. And then eventually I got to, the Cheat-Chew. And she goes, oh, that's no doubt about it. She goes, that's a creature. She goes, there's a the in there. She goes, that's a creature, definitely. She goes, I don't know what creature it is, but it has to be a lake monster or a Bigfoot or something, the Cheat-Chew. And I go, nope, the is in there to throw you off. I'm talking about Jonathan Cheat-Chew, St. Louis Blues.
That's cool.
Is it a hockey player or a monster?
That's a great idea. Yeah.
Canadian thing.
Well, yeah.
So I do stuff like that.
Oh, that's fun.
Shadow Stevens is one of my favorites. Okay. Shadow Stevens, former Hollywood Squares announcer, former Dave's World co-star, and former, most importantly in this context, host of American Top 40, the radio countdown show.
Right.
Deep voiced, golden god announcer, Shadow Stevens.
Yeah.
I had him on and I made him count down America's top 5 monsters.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah. Good use of the resource.
Well, my favorite part of it, when you listen to it, is I wrote his whole countdown for him, and he's like, in at number 5, he's, this, that, he's seen around the woods, blah, 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 it's Sasquatch, in at number 4, he goes through the whole thing, but my favorite part is the end. After number 1, I wrote this into his script, and he did it. It was so great to hear him get to this part of the script and do it. He goes, and number 1, and he goes through the whole thing, is whatever it was, Bigfoot or whatever it was. And he goes, and number 1, Bigfoot. And then I wrote this in the script and he said it. He goes, I'm Shadow Stevens.
That's awesome. Very cool. Yeah. Not many people can do that. Write a list for Shadow Stevens and have him read it. So that's very cool.
Yeah.
Your show is exceptionally, just has this amazing variety and you do an incredible job. I really like the fact that what you're doing, nobody else is doing. You've got a pretty unique, direction and an angle for the show. And it's a real pleasure to listen to. I listened to the episode with Murr from, Impractical Jokers. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was just, you just get the vibe like you're hanging out with a group of friends. So I really got to commend you on what you're doing and how you're doing it, because like I said, nobody else is doing it. And, it's a fantastic idea.
I appreciate that. I mean, we're trying. Murr is a good example of one that was a remote one where he was not with us in the studio, but he sounded pretty good. There was a couple moments where he got a little far from the mic and it didn't sound great, but in general, he sounded good. Yeah. And I remember that was a fun episode. And that's a great example of what I mean when I said it's important that if I'm having someone on from the current universe of celebrity, it's got to be someone I have a point of view about, someone who I'm a fan of what they're doing, that I watch it a lot, that I mean business about it. And you could see that I knew that show.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I brought up a lot of things from Impractical Jokers and his history on the show and things of his that I love, and that's what I mean when I say it's hard for me to fake it. Like if you stick me on there with, somebody from a famous sitcom that I happen not to watch, it won't be the same feel.
Right. No, it's a lot of fun, and I can't encourage you guys out there listening enough to go check out Monstrosity and David. It's been an incredible pleasure to have the chance to talk to you, and I'd love it if you'd come back. I mean, if you want to come back and revisit more of this, that'd be a lot of fun.
Sure. I better go back out there and drive Victory Boulevard and see what else I get spot so I come back with a new story.
Absolutely. I'll be here waiting, but ladies and gentlemen, check out Monstrosity. It is out there. It's worth your time. You're going to love it. And you're available on all the platforms as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
All the obvious podcast places. Yeah.
And you can find it online at monstrositypodcast.com. David, is there any other way that people can stay in touch with what you're doing?
DavidRace.com.
DavidRace.com.
We'll always be there. So either one, but monstrositypodcast.com is really the best place to go because it's sort of the home of all things for this show. It does take you to stuff about me. All our social media is linked off there, mine and the shows. Mm-hmm. And on Monstrosity Podcast right now on the website, there's a link to our Patreon, which has all of the old episodes of comedians talking about Bigfoot, the one that got me a TV deal. Mm-hmm. And those episodes are not in the public sphere anymore. They're not on any of the podcast platforms. The only place you can get to them now is through Monstrosity's Patreon.
Oh, very cool. All right. Well, David, it's been a pleasure meeting you. Thank you so much for making the time to come in today and talk with us.
Great. Enjoyed it.
All right, sir. We'll talk to you soon.
Get out.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us here on tonight's show. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please feel free to follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Paranormal Portal Radio, as well as finding us on Twitter. We're on Twitter at Paranormal Portal, PORTL, and we'd love to have you stop by our YouTube page and subscribe and check out our shows there. We got hundreds of shows, Journeys into the Paranormal Portal, so I hope you'll check it out, guys. We're over there at youtube.com/Paranormal Portal, so hope to see you guys soon. We'll be back, of course, for more podcasts in the coming days. So we love you all. Be good, be kind, be nice. Take care of each other. Help each other out. Find the magic in every day. And remember to laugh as much as you can.